Okay, well, let's get started here and folks can just join us as we move along here. So good morning. Well, it's not morning anymore. It's good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lily Zanotti. I'm the Programs and Events Coordinator for the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to welcome you all this afternoon to the Power of Women. And we're going to hear from this very incredible woman today, a Latina's journey serving our community and those in need. So welcome to everybody, and thank you very much to our sponsors today. Without our sponsorships, we definitely would not be able to bring any of these programs, chamber programs, to the community. So thank you very much. We have two sponsors, and I'm going to get to them in just a minute. But before we get started, I do want to go over a couple little housekeeping things. I am going to use you folks today as my guinea pigs. I know that the Chamber has been doing extremely many events online since the pandemic hit in March, and we have gone virtually with all our events. But basically, we've been using the Zoom platform in a meeting, and then we have used them as a webinar. So we just recently upgraded to a webinar, and today is my first webinar that we're hosting. We are still learning some little differences from a meeting, a Zoom meeting, to a webinar. So if you can, help me with this, I do have some, questions that I'm trying to answer myself, and hopefully some of you can help me. I know on a webinar that we have a Q&A area that people can ask questions, and then you can get the answer in them. My concern with that is that I think when you ask the question in that, it's only seen by the panelists or whoever's presenting. It's not seen by all attendees. I could be wrong, but I'm not sure. So for today's purpose, I'm going to ask you to please ask your questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Any questions that you have for Dr. Castiel, please ask them in there. We are going to have a hard stop at 1 o'clock or maybe before then, but once we're done, if there are some questions that you still want to ask Dr. Castiel and the time is up, we are going to remain on the call for a couple of minutes afterwards, just to make sure that we answer everything that anybody has questions with. So without further ado, I want to get started and introduce our sponsors here. And this morning we have from Clark University, the Grad Studies Office, we have a grad student, Beatrice Amenyowo. I hope I said it right, Amenyowo. And she's going to be giving our sponsor remarks for Clark. Welcome, Beatrice.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Beatrice Amenyowo. I'm a grad student at Clark University School of Professional Studies, studying a master's degree in communications, and I'm from Ghana. I also work with the School of Professional Studies as a peer advisor. Clark University is happy to partner with the Worcester Chamber of Commerce in its Power of Women series, because I think we both share similar values of fostering partnerships and collaborations among people from all walks of life, regardless of gender, race, and status. So we are very happy today to partner with you. And Clark University is also a firm believer in diversity and inclusion. And I believe that Dr. Mattie Castiel's story today is a shining example of how diversity and inclusion creates a thriving community. So I hope that today we'll all listen and be inspired by her story and commit to helping people around and fostering diversity and inclusion. I'd also like to chip in that admissions are still rolling at Clark University, and the good news is that the admission fee has been waived. So we encourage anybody here who wants to pursue higher education in grad school to visit our website, www.clarkuniversity.com. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Beatrice, and thank you to Clark for supporting us this entire year through our Power Women. This is our last event for this year. We are going to gear up and start planning our 2021 calendar. So be on the lookout for that as well, folks. Another sponsor for this series this year was new to us, and we welcomed them to the Worcester area, which was JP Morgan Chase and Company. And this afternoon, we have Deb Barry. She's the market executive for JP Morgan. Deb?
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. My name is Deborah Barry, and I lead the middle market commercial banking team for JP Morgan Chase, focusing on the greater Worcester area, as well as throughout New England. And we are fully committed to helping companies and individuals within the region. And one of the benefits of working for the biggest bank in the country is we have a ton of resources. And I welcome all of you to reach out and see how we can put our network to use to help you guys and gals. Women on the Move is our internal, we call it BRG, our internal group, and a dedication to helping promote women in our careers in the bank and in the communities we serve. So again, please reach out and help us leverage these resources. Thank you, and I thank you for helping, letting us be a part of today's conversation.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you very much, Deb. Now, without further ado, the main presenter this afternoon is Dr. Mattie Castiel. Dr. Mattie Castiel has always held a professional and personal mission to work with the underserved. She was born in Camagüey, Cuba, an immigrant to the US in 1962 as part of the Operation Peter Pan. Raised and educated in California, she completed her medical training at the University of California, San Francisco, after earning a BS in cellular and molecular biology from California State University. Dr. Castiel moved to Massachusetts to complete her residency at UMass Memorial, and she has worked as a board-certified physician in internal medicine in the Worcester community for over 30 years, including working at UMass Memorial Medical Center, the Family Health Center of Worcester, and also an associate professor of internal medicine, family medicine, and psychiatry at UMass Medical School. She is now the Commissioner for Health and Human Services for the City of Worcester and founder of Hector Reyes Restaurant. So welcome, Dr. Castiel.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. I never knew my story was that exciting, but I will try to see what I can tell you about. So as you know, right now, my job is I'm the Commissioner of Health and Human Services for the City of Worcester, and I also have a position at the medical school for both psychiatry medicine and family medicine. And yes, my roots started in Camagüey, Cuba. And you can see the bottom right-hand picture is my brother and I. I left Cuba when I was 6.5 years old. And as Lily said, I left in what was called the Peter Pan expedition when 4,000 kids left Cuba. And so I'll tell you a little bit about more of that. And then some of the other pictures there is an older picture of my mother and my father getting married. My grandparents are in the background. So next slide. So I left in what was called Peter Pan expeditions, which was flights out of Cuba to the United States that was sponsored by the Catholic Church, and 4,000 kids left Cuba for the United States. That was probably the hardest thing I think that I've done. I was 6.5 and my brother was 8, and we left by ourselves. We spent the first 24 hours in the airport. There is a famous, I still have memories of it, of this glass room that was called the fishbowl. And so you stayed inside the room until they got everything ready and they checked everything that you had, make sure that you were only taking the amount of clothing that they allowed you to take. And my parents were on the other side of the fishbowl, so we could touch hands, and basically that was it. We couldn't, just through the glass was all that we could do. And then they would take you into a room to make sure that you didn't take any jewelry or you didn't take anything else. You were only allowed a certain amount of clothing, certain amount of underwear, and two dolls. So I had two dolls with me when we came. We were originally supposed to end up, amazingly enough, in Boston, Massachusetts. And my mom wrote letters to the Catholic Church saying that I was allergic to cold and I was allergic to down. And that, and I don't know when I ever used down in Cuba, but that's what she wrote them. And so therefore, I ended up going to Miami, and I spent 2 weeks in Miami. And instead of going to Boston, I ended up being going to California. And so I spent a couple of months in California with a foster parent who took care of my brother and I. We didn't know a word of English, and so we had a dictionary. And yes, at 6.5, I was able to read, and my brother obviously knew more, so we were able to defend ourselves and started school in Lakewood, California. I think when I first came over and landed in Florida, I was mesmerized to be in a country that had so many things to offer. One of the first places they took me to was to a market, and I had never seen food like that. Usually you stand in line and there's somebody who, you order through the line what you need, and then they give it to you. You don't pick things out. And to go to a supermarket and be able to pick what you wanted. I hadn't seen apples in a long time. I think gum was another thing that I never had. And so trying those things out were incredible. So we ended up in Lakewood, California. And like I said, a couple of months later, my parents came to California, and we still lived with our foster parents till they were stable. So my mother worked in a factory folding towels, and my father worked in a furniture store taking the paint off of furniture. And so when they were stable, in the sense that they got an apartment and they were able to support us, then we moved in with our parents. So I went to elementary school there, and obviously high school, which is this picture. So elementary, junior, and high school there. My grandparents, my grandparents on my mother's side came over. My grandfather died shortly thereafter, and my parents, my dad's mom and dad, actually passed away in Cuba. So I met them when I was young and didn't get to see them again. And my father didn't get to see his parents again, and was unable to go back to Cuba just to even see them or go to the cemetery. So we, I ended up going to school, learning English, and didn't know really what I wanted to do when I was young. And then at some point, I started working at a pharmacy. And while I was working at the pharmacy in a hospital, I ended up getting to meet people in the hospital. And I ended up talking to somebody who was going to have open heart surgery. And I talked to the surgeon and see if he would let me see the surgery. And I saw the surgery, and I truly fell in love with medicine because I got to meet the person, from the outside and from the inside. So that was really fascinating to me. And I decided that I would go into medicine. And throughout my youth, I think, and through my father's teaching, there was a lot of, sort of how do we help people and how do we change a community? And so he was very, I don't know, a big part of everything that I do now. And so if you hear some kind of choking voices at every time I mention my dad, it still brings back those memories. So I went to high school, and then let's see what the next one is. I went to college at Cal State Northridge. That's my my dad in the middle, my brother there, my brother's wife, who ended up, she was my best friend and ended up marrying my brother. So I went to Cal State Northridge. There wasn't any point in time where you could, like, I think about my kids now that we kind of toured around and when they looked at colleges. My parents were very much more interested in what my my brother was doing, and women sort of had a less of a role. And so if I wanted to go to college, I would go where my brother went to school. So I didn't never pick the school. I never took any entrance exams. I just went to the state college and followed my brother's footsteps. And my brother drove me back and forth from school. So I graduated. So I started circa 73 is what you're saying. Okay, I think I graduated. I graduated high school and I started high school in 72, graduated in, no, I went into college in 74. So you're asking me. So anyway, I graduated at Cal State Northridge 4 years later. And then I was, the next slide. And then it was time to decide about medical school. And interestingly enough, I had never told my parents that I was interested in going into medical school or that I had applied to medical school. I think during that time, leaving your home and moving out as a single woman was not something that you did. And so ultimately, when I got an interview finally with University of California, San Francisco, which is the buildings that are there, my parents was the first time that they heard that I was going into med school, so they were a little bit freaked out. And I had my first interview there when I was 21 years old, or I turned 21 the day of my interview, and truly, I think hit it with the person who interviewed me, told him about my dreams in life, and he ended up admitting me. And I think one of the things that was interesting was that I had other interviews and never felt really comfortable about interviewing. And I think when I interviewed at University of California, San Francisco, the gentleman who interviewed me was a Black man, and I felt more comfortable talking about my life experiences and his life experiences back and forth. And we had so much more in common that I felt comfortable and I was able to speak freely, and subsequently got into to medical school. And one of the things regarding medical school was that we weren't, I wasn't truly prepared. I hadn't taken all the classes. We went on sort of the minority student, equal access for people. And so there was a group of us who got accepted, and it was interesting. I still remember my first day when they said, how many people have had biochemistry before? And almost the entire class raised their hand that they had biochemistry, and the group of us who were Latino, were Black in the class, had not. So we started a little bit behind, but the idea was to create equity for everybody studying medicine, in the sense that we could have more Latinos and more Black doctors in the community. So we formed a team there and worked incredibly hard to make it out of medical school and into residency. The picture there, which I found when I was going through some of my stuff, is just a little piece of who I was, I guess, when I was in medical school and throughout my life, which is really advocating for communities of color. And so at that time, they were going to cut the budget for the school. And one of my pieces was that they obviously shouldn't cut the budget, and they should increase the amount of minority students that attended the schools, because we knew that there was such a need for that. And in particular, just even when my parents were in the United States, how difficult it was for them to go see the doctor, not knowing the language. And I used to go with them to all the appointments, and it was tough for them to get their message across, and for the doctor to really understand what was going on. And so I think the idea of moving more Latinos into school and more Blacks into school was our goal that we had throughout medical school. And then I went to residency in St. Louis, Missouri. I used to call it Misery because I didn't know anybody, and it's tough to move out of at least your home area and move to a completely different area. And so I initially started that I wanted to be a surgeon and I wanted to be a ear, nose, and throat surgeon. So I did a year of general surgery and 2 years of ENT, and decided that I really didn't like it. And then went to work in the ER for a little bit. And I met my husband as I was working in the ER, trying to decide where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. He was OBGYN at the time, also in St. Louis. I went to St. Louis University, and that's where I did residency, and he did his residency in Washington University. So we met there, and I was going to say, where else do I say? So anyway, go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So we met there. He decided that he, when he finished his OBGYN program, wanted to come to the East Coast to try something different. And then we would go back to California. I had just started at that time my internal medicine residency and ended up finishing it here in Worcester. I had no idea what Worcester was. I called it Worcester. I did an ICU rotation in Leominster until people straightened me out and told me it was Leominster. But I was pretty sure that we were going to go back. I had not really experienced winter. It is exactly what my mother said when we left Cuba, that I was allergic to all this. I wasn't allergic, but I really couldn't stand the cold weather. And so thinking that I was going to go back and back to California and warmth and be with my family, it is about 32 years later that I am still here in California, in Massachusetts. And I still have not gotten used to the cold weather. And this is my family. Those are my two boys, Adam and Zachary. And they were probably, each step that you go along in life, you say, oh, this was the hardest thing I did. Med school was the hardest thing I did. Residency was the hardest thing I did. But then I said, having kids was the hardest thing I've ever done, but probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done. So those are my two boys that are 11 and a half months apart. And so they're Irish twins. And the picture above is my boys now with their significant other. My son, who's the oldest, with the sort of checkered shirt and the brown jacket, just got married last year. And my other son, who's there with sort of in the back, he was supposed to get married this August, and we're still waiting. Hopefully it'll be next August that he will get married. They've both been seeing the same women probably for 7 to 8 years. And they one of the things that I did with them was I said, you need to leave Worcester and try something different, see what life is about, because I grew up in LA, and obviously it's a big city. And I wanted the same for them. When I first came here it wasn't Worcester. That's what they told me. It was really Holden is where they told me to move to, because they thought schools were better in Holden. So so we ended up moving to Holden, and that's where my kids went to school. But it was truly not a diverse area, and I wanted them to experience the world. So I told them to go outside of Massachusetts to go to school. So my oldest Adam went to school at Northwestern, and my youngest Zachary went to school in Washington at American University. And they have never decided to come back. So one of my biggest mistakes was to tell them that, because I thought we would, continue living in the same area. So my oldest now lives in New York, and he's a lawyer in New York. And my youngest is doing research at University of Michigan, studying cell bio, and hopefully will finish this year. And we were never allowed when I was young to have pets. Pets you keep outside. Pets are not, you don't keep pets inside. And my mom could never understand why you would want to have a pet. But as soon as I moved to Massachusetts and I had my kids, which were really back to back, which was one of the reasons I didn't we didn't move out. I came here, moved here, got married in 1989, had my kids. That following year, I was, or not even the following year, I was 34 years old when I had my first, and 35 when I had my second. And then you were working, and so you didn't even have time to think about what else you were doing. And so my first dog is the one on the left hand, which was my love of my life, along with my husband and my kids, was Chucha. And then Chucha was lived with us for 15 years. And then the dog on the bottom is the one we just recently got, who her name is Lola. But enjoy having pets, and my kids also have pets, and so everybody now it's a different world than when I was a kid. So next slide. So these are my son. The top one is my son Zachary, who got engaged first to Lena, and has not been able to get married yet. So hopefully it'll happen next August. And that's one of the pictures of my oldest, who got married last year. So while I was in Worcester, I first worked in the emergency room at UMass for a little while after I finished residency, trying to decide what I wanted to do. I kind of came to Worcester and asked, the first thing I asked for was, where was the Latino community? And, they sort of said, oh, it's on the other side of Main Street. And there weren't a whole lot of Latinos who came to. I worked at Memorial for a while, so there weren't a whole lot of Latinos there. But they told me to go to Family Health Center, and that's where the Latino community was. So I ended up going to the Family Health Center. Most of their docs are family medicine docs. I was an internist. And I think that the idea that I spoke Spanish, they hired me as an internist, and I worked at Family Health for 10 years. And ultimately, after I left Family Health, I wanted to figure out what else I wanted to do. I really got involved in the community. I was part of boards like Centro Las Americas, and really got to meet a little bit more of what was happening in the Latino community. And then I took a job with UMass Memorial to do, I had practices in all of the Worcester housing sites that were for the disabled and for the elderly. And so I had each building that I would go to, it would be an apartment, and I would have clinics in those apartments. And while I was there, next slide. While I was doing that job, and I was on the board of Centro Las Americas, I met a gentleman named Hector Reyes, who he himself suffered with substance use, and really his past was that he was looking to figure out how he would get treatment, and would try to go to some of the programs that he may have been the only Latino there and just didn't feel comfortable. And one of his dreams was to put a treatment facility for Latino men. And so I worked with him to, as a volunteer, working with him to figure out how we would do a program for Latino men. So our goal was that if we were to do a program that was culturally sensitive for Latino men, that they would recover. And so this was the logo for the Hector Reyes house that that we formed. So we started working on it on 2004, and really meeting and talking about some of the things that we wanted to do, collecting all the data that we needed to put together, and really looking, with the premise of understanding health disparities and access to care, and that, our racial and ethnic minorities receive a lower quality of healthcare than non-minorities, even when they had, the same insurance, the same income, the same education. And so how were we going to change some of that? So also looking at, how do we get involved in the community and understand what happens in the community? And that's sort of been the premise of everything that I do. I think that, even while at Hector Reyes, or now in my new position, is really getting to know the community and understanding, what are the needs in the community. And I show the slide, I actually stole it from Monica Burrell, who's the commissioner public health at the state level. But she showed this slide, which basically shows that as a doc, we're only seeing just certain parts. We're seeing disease and injury, and we work with risk behavior, trying to get people to stop smoking or to eat appropriately. But nothing really changes unless you change living conditions that people are living in, and really looking at the inequities that exist, racism, both structural, systemic racism. How do we change that? And if we don't change that, it's very difficult to change the disease process, or even to put an impact on risk behaviors. So when we started this program, one of the things that happened then was the same thing that happens now, is that people feel that, hold on, that people feel, that's my ringtone, a little memory of Cuba while I work. But people always feel that they don't want any treatment facilities in their backyard. So same issues that occurred today occurred back in the days that we were trying to do it. And one of the things that was great, and if you can see in the paper, it says Latino drug rehab greeted. You never saw that. And part of it is that once you get to know the community and people know who you are and what you're trying to do, they were actually big supporters of having us move there. They had confidence that we would do the right thing when we moved in there. So we moved in 2009, April of 2009, and Hector Reyes died July 4th of 2009. So over the last 11 plus years, I've been heading the program up until I came to the city, but I still am the medical director of the program. But I'll give you a little bit of background on the program. Next slide. So this is the Hector Reyes house. And again, we ended up, taking this house from the Willis Center, which no longer exists, but it was the Black nonprofit that existed in the community. And so we worked with them to figure out how we can take this property. And so we started the program. And again, I was a full-time physician working at Worcester Housing, and I did this as a volunteer. And I always tell people and med students that when you really love what you do, and there's a passion for what you do, that you can work hours on end and not really feel that you're working. And I didn't know anything about addiction when I first started working with Hector Reyes. I knew that this was a problem in our community, and the Latinos numbers in the community for substance use was much higher than any other group in Worcester. And one of the things I wanted to do was make sure that I made it a home for people. A lot of the people were incarcerated when they left jail, and were incarcerated, and when they left jail, they either became homeless, and so really never really had a home. And so how do we make this treatment facility a home and not an institution? So I'm going to show you just some pictures of what the program looks like. So that's our bedroom. We worked with Job Corps to really remodel the house because we had no money. And I want to say, at least, the interesting that I still tell medical students is that that medical degree did a lot to secure some funding from banks and to be able to apply for loans. Even though I had never started a program, I had never been in business or anything like that, but that's what was able, we knocked on every single bank, actually. And I have to say that Bay State Bank was the one who gave us the loan, and we were, that's how we got started. And we used Job Corps, which is always interesting, same youth with similar problems. And so that they're trying to do well. We're the ones who built this house for the older adults. McGovern was somebody who was very helpful in putting this program together and helping us move it. And again, I knew nobody when I was doing all of this. I knew the Latino community, but didn't know everybody else there. Senator Chandler was also a champion to helping us push this program. And Hector Reyes is in the gray suit. So again, he was there to to see the program open and have his dream come true. And this is just the Job Corps kids, you know, when they came to work, and then when we opened the house, they put their Sunday clothes, their nice clothes, to come out and be part of the process. So what came next? We realized when they were in the program that it was difficult to rehab people who've been incarcerated for numerous years, because that's been the method of treating addiction, has been incarceration instead of looking at it as a disease, and truly functions as a disease process. And so we realized that people came out of jail without having any job training, without having any education. A lot of them, you know, couldn't read or write, or some graduated and got their GEDs through jail, but the majority did not. And so how are we going to help them through that process, and how would they be able to afford housing if they can't get a decent job to help them? And so we opened up Casa Reyes, which is a transition house right next door to Hector Reyes, just so that we, you know, if they needed help, we were always there. So next. And that's just and I just show that because every time we did something to open the program, to open something new, same as when we opened the house, is really invite the community to see, and again, get rid of the stigma regarding addiction, and that they're no different than anybody else. And so we had, you know, some people from the White House who came, Deputy Director of Substances in Washington, who came down and was our keynote speaker. Next. And then again, we graduated people at the same time so that people could see that this is possible. Next. And then, so this is a transition house that we opened. It's Casa Reyes. And again, when you graduate the program, you come next door. You pay $425 a month. If you pay on time, again, teaching people how to save money, it's really $325. And so I'm going to just show you a little bit of the interior of the house, just that you can see. You can keep going, just so that you can see that the premise is to make it a home, and that they deserve to live in a home. So so that's been part of the process. And I think when they were living there, they had difficulties finding jobs. They had difficulties staying in jobs. I remember at one point UMass gave them jobs in maintenance, and they were there at most a week to 10 days because they were on their phone, they were late to work. And so the majority of them lost their jobs. And so we need to figure out, how do we train people to you know, to learn soft skills, how to get there on time, how to dress appropriately, how to talk to people, how to take orders from a boss. And so I thought about how I would do that. And the only thing that I knew how to do was actually cook Cuban food. And so we looked for a place, and we opened up in 2000, I think 15. We opened up Cafe Reyes. And so it's a job training program for the men in recovery. They do it while they're in the program. And this is a way to teach the men, again, job skills, but it also brings them in contact with the community that they've never been in contact with, and also brings the community in contact with them, and to realize that, again, that they're no different than anybody else, and trying to eliminate the stigma of addiction. And again, we invite everybody when we're doing this, and talk about why we're opening up a restaurant. And again, next slide. We graduate people. We graduated all that group of people from the program, and just showing them that it can be done, and for them to be proud of what they've done during the time that they were there. We partnered with Consigma Community College to train them to become prep chefs. I show that because no matter what I say, that you don't call them addicts, because that's not what. That's not who they are. It's not like I have rheumatoid arthritis and nobody goes around calling me a rheumatic. And so it doesn't define who they are. And so, but this was on Worcester Magazine, and it should have read A New Life for People in Recovery. And so, so next slide. And this is a cafe, was on Shrewsbury Street. Next. And again, everybody came in, we cut the ribbons and opened the restaurant. You can see Harriet Chandler was always a part of it, and McGovern has always been a part of it. And that was my first time meeting the mayor. And then ultimately I'm working with the mayor. So next, and this is the inside of the restaurant. That Cuba mural there was painted by one of the residents of the house. The talent that you can find in the guys in the program, especially if you let that talent come out, is incredible. So next, and this is part of the restaurant that used to be a bar. Now it's a bar for all kinds of coffees. Next. And these are some of the guys prepping food in the restaurant. So a lot of the recipes, everything that's there, I actually taught them how to do it, and I think they're on their own now. Now I can just send recipes and they sort of can play with it. I still fight with them a little bit because a lot of them are Puerto Rican, Dominican, and so you know, culturally in a lot of ways similar, but foods are still different. Cubans tend to eat a little more sugar, like they put beans in their sugar, and they absolutely freak out when they have to put sugar in their beans. So next. And these are some of the things that they make. The Cuban sandwich. The Cuban sandwich was never part of Cuba, but Miami made the Cuban sandwiches. So we made the Cuban sandwiches here. We actually imported the bread from Cuba just to be exactly, I'm not from Cuba, from Miami, just to be exactly, you know, what the Cuban sandwich is. And then they make things like the pork roast. They make, and then ultimately they end up getting a certificate that they finished the program, that they attended Quinsigamond, that they got all the training, so that if they're looking for a job elsewhere, they can see that they've gotten the training. And since we've had the restaurant, you know, people have gotten jobs elsewhere. I try to advise them to at least spend at least a day at the restaurant if they can. Part of the disease of addiction is that they can relapse. And if they continue to have some close contacts with us, the possibility of that becomes less and less. And if that even happens, it's at least a one day, but they build trust with us to be able to help them through that process. So part of the treatment was obviously changing lives. And what we did was, next, is I guess for me, it's the feeling of family that people have missed. And so how do I give back to these men who have lost their families, and not because they didn't start off with family, but because they've been incarcerated, because they've been in addiction, they have no support. And so trying to give them the support so that they can go back to their families and reunite with their families. So this is my house. We celebrate holidays. This is Hanukkah that we're celebrating. I didn't tell you a little bit of my background, that I'm originally, my ancestors are from Spain. They were Spanish Jews. They left Spain during the Inquisition, and then ultimately ended up in Turkey. So my grandparents were born in Istanbul. And then shortly thereafter, just with what was happening in Turkey, in the 1920s, my grandparents went to Cuba, and my parents were, they met in Istanbul, went to Cuba and married in Cuba, and had my parents. So my parents were born in Cuba, and ultimately I was born in Cuba. And so we celebrated Hanukkah. I teach them every holiday that I can think of, and to be aware of the world. And this is some of the things that we always do is graduation. You can keep going. We do things like, you know, give back to the community. The other picture was just feeding people at Worcester Housing. And they volunteered to cook and volunteered to prepare to hand them the food. Next. So we went to Washington, D.C. together. You know, part of it is traveling and seeing what the world is like, that there's more than just addiction. Next. And then we would rent a house in Cape Cod and, you know, and spend a week out in the Cape doing something different. And next. And this is one of my favorite pictures. This is how this gentleman says Puerto Ricans go swimming in the Cape is they can't go in, they just put their finger in the water. And then in 2015, I became Commissioner of Health and Human Services for the city of Worcester. I ended up getting the job because I'm trying to think of her name. She's at Worcester State and I'm blanking out of her name right now, but she sent me the application and said you would be good. For some reason, I thought they'll never hire me. And here I am. And so, next. And this is our team. This is, you know, so I oversee 5 divisions: the youth opportunities, public health, elder affairs, veterans affairs, and human rights and disabilities. Next. And then I think one of the things that I came here to do when in this job, and part of why I was interested in getting it, is because I wanted to make sure that we looked at addiction differently, that we looked at mental health, which go hand in hand together, that we looked at homelessness differently, that we looked at incarceration differently and promote treatment in jails and job training programs in jail. So some of the things that actually happened during my time in the last 5 years, along with all of the accomplishments that all the different divisions have done, was in 2015, we got syringe exchange, which was something that for years providers were trying to get so that we could prevent HIV and hepatitis. I really did trainings all throughout the community to talk about addiction and how we improve addiction. We worked with Women Against Sexual Exploitation, helped Nikki Bell, who started the LIFT program, worked to put a residential treatment facility with her, and really to learn a lot more about trafficked women. We worked with Net of Compassion to put Hotel Grace, which is a overflow shelter for the winters. Really tried to unite the 14 largest cities and their health departments and tried to collaborate together on how we work together and how we see the issues that are facing overall Massachusetts, but in particular in our particular cities. Mental health task force, looking at mental health. We had a homeless task force, a reentry out of jail task force. Really, all of them are still in progress, and some headway has been done with all of them. Looking at comprehensive sex education in the schools, we still haven't won that one yet, but still looking forward to continue to push it. You know, the Housing First Coordinating Council to look at the chronically homeless, and now in the process of building housing for them. We worked with UMass to do a harm reduction van that will come out in the next couple of months, and really will go out into the community where people who don't feel comfortable accessing addiction can actually, we go to them and see if we can help them. Last year, you know, since COVID, we ended up taking the population from SMOC and dividing them. And so we started COVID-19 shelters. We were the first in Massachusetts to do that, and the first to go around testing the homeless community to make sure that they all remain safe. And then through our office, we have hired homeless outreach workers, recovery coaches, reentry navigators through jail, things that weren't here prior to 2015. Our main topic that we're also working on now is racism as a public health issue. And we're opening up a women's shelter this year as part of some of the things that we're doing. And lastly, this is that I got the Chancellor's Medal in 2019. And I say that it's a proudest moment is because nobody recognized, nobody in academic medicine really recognizes, really recognizes what community work is all about. And I was pretty surprised that I ended up getting that, but that was my biggest accomplishment. The community work in the community is recognized in a medical institution. And this is our team, part of our team as we continue to work during COVID-19. So it says, and the battle continues. And that's it. Any questions?
Wow. Well, you had me a lot of tears here, Miss Dr. Castiel. Thank you so much for sharing that. One of my questions that I was going to ask you, and I have so many because we have a lot of what's the word I want to say?
Familiar.
Familia. Family. I can't even say the word.
A lot of similarities.
But there you go. That we have together. I am also a Cuban immigrant to the States here, came as a young child. I'm jealous because you were able to leave with your 2 dolls. I am still to this day, it's part of my family story that my doll, my precious doll, was taken away from me when I was 6 years old. And to this day, my mother had promised me this doll and I still have not gotten that doll to this day. But those are just little stories, which your journey has been incredible. You're a remarkable woman for what you do. And I thank you for helping so many in the community here. I was going to ask you, what is one of your proudest accomplishments that you have done professionally and personally, which now you just shared your last slide as one of your professionals, is being recognized for what you're doing for our community. So I applaud you for that. But as a personal, like, what are some of your proudest moments that you have had?
My kids are certainly
Obviously.
my proudest moments, and where they are in life now are my
Right.
proudest moments. But also, I always have to mention my husband. I tend to forget my husband. He's a cool guy. I like my husband. I have no issues with him. But I also, and he's put up with me for this long. But I think it's also, the Hector Reyes house, and they call me mom because I have them as my kids also.
Yeah.
And so it's a different way to do medicine. But part of that way of doing medicine is that, I don't know, you give back what they have not had. And so
Right.
that you can build up their self-esteem just like I built my son's self-esteem. And so how do you get them ready to go out into the world?
Right. That's incredible. You should be proud of that. I've had the pleasure of going to Cafe Reyes several times, and I'm going to tell you, every single gentleman that has been there has been incredible. Of course, I share a little bit of my story, and then we become friends, and that's our nationality. We're just like that. We're very warm and accepting, and community and family is very important to us. And by the way, I think the woman that you were referring to that helped you and told you about the commissioner's job at City Hall was Stacy Lester.
You're absolutely right. There
you go.
Stacy. Yes.
Yeah, she's a great lady too.
Yes. Yes.
So that's wonderful. I do have another question here that came in the question, and this is something like I asked everybody to please help me get familiarized. Did everybody see this question that came in the Q&A chat? It's from Mary Kate Daly. She says, where do you and the city go next? Thank you for supporting the community. And I know you shared some of your things that you're working on right now, but she's asking, where do the cities goes next?
So obviously dealing with COVID and being able to protect our community from COVID is number one right now. And I still continue to work to bring a better method of care for the homeless that we are able to bring, just like we did for the COVID shelters. And that's been sort of the piece about COVID, is that you learn a lot of things about what's happening in the community because now you're also hands-on and you see who's being disproportionately affected. And so I think bringing healthcare to both healthcare, mental health, addiction care to the shelters is our prime goal. And to be able to support the homeless community that they should not be in shelters. And if they're in shelters, it's a minimal amount of time. We have what's called housing first. And that's that if somebody is homeless, you place them in housing right away and you bring the services to them. They're staying around in shelters a lot longer. And so how do we go back to that model and provide care to support people and get people to actively want to want housing? And they can do that. If somebody is in in addiction and full-blown addiction, you start bringing them medication for addiction, they can actually decide that they're doing better, and now housing may be something that they'll accept. And so part of it is moving into that. I think, sort of looking at mental health, and in particular, even now, and we've been looking at it for a while, but, how do we support the kids in the public school systems? And now with virtual programming, I mean, I'm concerned about what happens with our youth, and it'll be a year easily. And I'm actually one of the ones who also believes that we need to figure out how we get the kids back in school, that we test just as regularly as we do in the colleges, and get the kids back in school. I think reentry is something that is important to us. There's lots of initiatives that are working right now, looking at taking people from jail and meeting them a couple of months before, and then being able to provide all the services that they need so that they don't go back to jail. And data has shown that actually works, and it's what we're trying to do. So those are just some of the things that we are doing. Obviously, public health racism as a public health crisis is really trying to get people to understand that what communities of color struggle through, why they struggle through it, what's the past been like, what got them to this position of where we are now, and how all of us have been part of that racism piece, and how do we change that, and how do we provide appropriate opportunities, like I got opportunities to be able to go through medical school and supported through that process. So hoping to do the same for the rest of the community, and providing equity so that we don't have some that are staying at the bottom, that we move them all up.
Mm-hmm. Is there anywhere on the city website that people can go in to get involved and help with some of these groups and programs?
Sure. On the website, you'll see some of the topics that we've been working on. But certainly through my office at City Hall, 455 Main Street, I'm in room 101. I'll let Dominica put my email there if anybody wants to do anything, volunteer in any which way. We would love that.
Perfect. Or they can reach out through me and I can connect them to your office directly. Another question that came in, and it says, have you noticed, what are some of the changes in the Latino community, and that have you noticed in the past 30 years living here in Worcester? Have you noticed anything?
I think that we've developed some good community activists who are supporting the community. It has been a process to do that. I think that one of the things that I'm also proud of is working with UMass. We started the COVID-19 Equity Task Force, and usually medicine, we're sort of, everybody is together, and they tend to leave community out here, not hearing the voices of the community. And I think one of the important pieces is that we have, UMass docs, and then we have community people who are able to advocate about what are the needs, what are housing, or how do we reach those communities? If we say that Latinos and Blacks have the highest rates of acquiring COVID, how are we reaching out to the community?
Right.
What do we do different in the community? So I think the idea of being able not to say, come to me, but we're going to come to you, that real outreach is an important piece that we're trying to work with. I think that, you know, one of the reasons why I took the vaccine, I think it was the first picture that has the vaccine, getting the shot is how do we get community to understand about the importance of getting the vaccine, whether it's the COVID vaccine or the flu vaccine. But I think from your question, I think it's more community being able to speak up about what their needs are and how do they go about it.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I am going to wrap this up because we're a little after 1 o'clock when you thought we weren't going to even get to 1 o'clock.
I know.
I really want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for what you're doing here at Worcester. I'm looking forward to meeting you personally on the side and sharing our stories here. And for those of you that have not gone to the Cafe Reyes, you definitely have to go and experience the food there. It's delicious. Of course, it's mine, you know, my own food too, but they do a great job and it's a great place. So please help those gentlemen and help our community and get involved. And thank you very much today to our sponsors, JP Morgan and Chase, and to Clark University for helping the Chamber with the Power of Women sponsorship this year. We appreciate all your help and your support going through everything that we had to transition this year. So we're very grateful for that. And let me see, I think I have one more question. Oh, no, it was Stacy Lester.
No.
Yes,
Stacey
she was
there?
on here. Yes, she was on here listening to you. So she said, thank you very much. A matter of fact, and let's just, let's see if she's still on. I am going to, no, she must have gotten off.
I didn't know she was on. That's very cool.
So thank you very much, Dr. Castiel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you all.
All righty. Bye-bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.